I vouched for you personally. I think that you should be on the show, obviously. But let's talk about why. I am Christina Suter, and this is the Real Estate Breakthrough Show, where we talk about the reality of real estate, the mindset you need in order to face the reality of what it is, and tips and tricks to get you moving forward in investing. I am your host, Christina Suter. And today we have an awesome guest, Brian Hennessey. And I was so excited because I actually didn't know Brian before he showed up at my meeting middle of last year. And I felt he was such a wealth of knowledge, has such a deep experience in real estate, and has such a great mindset around it that I really wanted to bring him onto my show. So Brian, welcome to my show.
Christina, thank you so much for having me on.
And so let me, for a moment here, just do a very quick bio on you so people can get a sense for your background. I mean, I vouched for you personally. I think that you should be on the show, obviously. But let's talk about why. So Brian Hennessey has been in the commercial real estate industry for 35 years, as a commercial broker for 26 years, senior vice president of acquisitions and dispositions for 6 years as a major investor, and ran his own real estate syndication asset management company for 3 years. Oh my gosh, that must have been so hard. We'll talk about that. He has represented a number of Fortune 500 tenants, including Bank of America, the Walt Disney Company, and Baxter Healthcare, with over 12 million square feet of sale and lease transactions. Many painful. I like the honesty. But yes, valuable lessons were learned and a wealth of experience was accumulated. And out of those experience, you are the author of the #1 bestseller in commercial real estate books on Amazon, the Due Diligence Handbook for Commercial Real Estate. You also have 2 other books, the How to Add Value Handbook for Commercial Real Estate and the Residential Agent's Handbook for Commercial Real Estate. And you are also the creator and instructor on the Due Diligence video course with 16 modules, which allows for a deep dive and actually has a certification at the end. So courses.impactcoachingsystems.com. We'll have you repeat that at the end of the show.
Sure.
Brian, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Well, thank you again for having me. It's a great honor and pleasure to be with you here.
So you've been with Avison Young for how many years now?
I'm going to my 4th year here now.
Okay. And why and how did you ever even get started in real estate? I mean, you've been involved in this field for a very long time. So, when you were a young man knocking around, what made you go, oh yeah, I want to get involved in real estate? One of those fields that's incredibly hard to do, but makes you wealthy if you do it right?
Well, I actually started out in the residential end of real estate, and I never really got excited about it. I just was always seemed to be more interested in the commercial side, and I'll give you a little story about it. There was a office in Brentwood, California, and there was about 85 agents in the office, and there were 2 gentlemen that sat in a little office in the back, and they were the commercial division.
Okay.
And I constantly was going back there to ask them questions and tell them about properties I saw and trying to find out how I could get involved with commercial. And they told me, look, you're either in residential or you're in commercial. You can't do both. So you just refer them to us and we'll pay a referral fee. And I was obviously disappointed.
Right.
Because I really wanted to get into it.
Right.
But I did finally get into it. And when I first started out, it was 1985, and there was a lot of building going on. Mm-hmm. And my first day at the office, the broker I went to work for just pointed me at a cube and a phone and said, there's your spot right there. Just start smiling and dialing.
Right.
And I was like, what? Who am I dialing? Right. And So that was a whole other learning thing right away. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what the first step I'd do here. So I wasn't sure if I was supposed to grab the yellow pages and start calling. Those of you who don't know what those are.
Right. Used to be a phone book. Right. It's called Yellow Pages.
The internet now. We don't.
That's right.
So at any rate, that's how I got started. And I was fortunate enough to meet some people there that were open to me working with them. And I was kind of a nudge. I was, hey, what do you work on? Can I help you? What is it that I can do to help you? And there weren't a lot of resources around back then. I'd be happy if I grabbed a book on it and it was enticing to me. And but I managed to find my way somehow. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing it ever since then. So I would say it's been good to me. Hasn't been always perfect, that's for sure, but I've enjoyed a lot of good moments working in the commercial industry. And I've also met a lot of really neat people.
So now you specialize in working with Avison Young. So what is it that had you wander? Like first you said, I was in residential, and then commercial really is sort of a different animal. Like you clearly move from residential into commercial, and clearly that's where the bulk of your career has been. Why commercial, and why do you think that that's a good place to be?
That's a good question. I really felt like you didn't have a life in residential. That was part of my problem, is like people would call you 11 o'clock at night. You were always working weekends, and it would I just felt like all your time was monopolized with it. And again, I couldn't get excited. I always said, in something interesting, there was mostly men when I first started out in the business.
That's not surprising.
and there were a few women in the office that were mostly, I would say, part-time housewives that were working in it.
Yep.
And there was a gal that worked full-time in it who was very, very sharp and very successful. And she actually was kind enough to allow me to ask a lot of questions, what have you. And I ended up doing my first sale on one of her listings. And by watching her and listening to her, I said, you know what? Women are so much better at this residential stuff than men. I don't know why. They just seem to relate better to the clients. And
right.
And lo and behold, it became more dominated by women than the men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But eventually.
Yeah. So,
but why did you switch over to, why did you switch over to commercial for yourself though? Because clearly, I mean, you were drawn to it. Like you said, your first story is these two guys in the back, in the cubicle, and they're like, "Go away, you punk! Just send them over to us as an affiliate fee, right?" And you're like, "No, I'm not going to go away. I'm going to work this out," and you did.
I figured it out. Well, what happened was, I really liked. Well, first of all, commercial real estate's all over the place too. So it's one of those things where when you start learning about numbers and how the numbers work in it, to me, that was exciting. The other thing I liked about it, it was less emotional. I won't say there's no emotion in commercial, but it's less emotional than the residential end of it. And so I just kind of liked the idea that you could crunch numbers and look at properties. And I remember saying to a client one day, well, I want to tell you about this building I saw, but it's not very beautiful, but it's the numbers look pretty good. He says, let me tell you something. Any building that cash flow is a beautiful building to me.
That's right.
So I said, okay, I like this about this business.
Right.
So it makes sense. That's kind of how I segued into it. And then it just kind of evolved, and one of the reasons I wrote the third book, the Residential Agents Handbook for Commercial Real Estate, is the biggest trend I've seen in the last, I would say, 10, 15 years has been more residential agents doing more commercial transactions, because the internet basically leveled the playing field so they can put their listings right up next to everybody else's, and they kind of have a leg up because they've already done business with the client and with the residential stuff. They gained their trust. And so it's like, hey, can you help me with this? Right. So I thought, okay, I should really, and I don't mind because I started out in the residential end of the biz, helping and working on transactions with residential agents. But what I found is a lot of them are shooting from the hip, and they're really not doing their clients any big service by doing that. So I figured, hey, you can still do this, but build a foundation underneath it. And you might find out that you want to end up doing it full time, or you might find out that you can do half your business commercial and half residential. So, or even just refer it out to people and get great referral fees. But because you have enough knowledge to be able to sound like you could, talk the talk, right? And so that's one of the reasons I put that together. But
so let me tell you a quick story, and then I do have another question for you. So what I love about the Residential Agent's Handbook for Commercial Real Estate is you nailed it on, to me, you nailed it, right? You hit the nail on the head. I was with a client the other day, and he was talking to me about this agent is pushing on him to make an offer. And I kept saying, what's the purpose of you making an offer on this piece of real estate? And he couldn't quite answer that question. I'm like, well, how does it serve your portfolio? How is it going to, move you forward? What's the purpose of this real estate? Is it for flipping? Is it for residential cash flow? Like, what is it for, right? And so we ended up having a conversation with the agent that was pushing on him. And the agent's like, well, see, here's the thing, is that you buy it, and then because it's such a big lot, you can put a junior ADU on it and a regular ADU on it, and now you have 3 units on a single residential property, which he would be allowed to do by the state of California code now, right? So effectively, he's talking about taking a residential piece and moving it towards quote unquote commercial, right? Not true commercial, right? It's 3 units, it's not 5 and above. And I kept saying but what I said to my client is, but it's not going to cash flow. Like, what's the advantage of this if it's not going to cash flow? And you could hear the agent shooting from the hip saying, well, I think the rents might be around, and I think it might be, and I'm like, no, he's not. He's a residential agent talking about the value of how this would be a really beautiful triplex because there's enough space on the lot to do it. And ADUs sound like a lot of fun because that's a new code in California. So clearly this must be valuable versus here's what the rents are going to be. Here's what your cash and cash return is going to be. Here's what your forced appreciation is going to look like. And here's why you want to sell it in 3 years, right? Or keep it, ongoingly. So I love that because it's like, yeah, it's beautiful on one side, but the residential agent was kind of missing what is the numbers side. So I want to backtrack to this for a minute. The Due Diligence Handbook for Commercial Real Estate. When you were at my meeting, you talked about how that book is really just a culmination of your notes. And the story you told with that, I thought was very important for people to understand as to why did you need so many notes? How did you get to needing so many notes that you actually had to write a whole book to be able to publish all of these notes that you created in real estate? So please tell us the story.
Okay, so I had been a commercial broker for 18 years. And one of the clients that I had recently acquired and sold a property for, I sold another property to him. And this was his avocation. He was actually a CEO turnaround guy. And he said, I really want to buy another property. And then I got whatever it was, $2.5 million that we can go up to, and I'll buy another office building. I said, okay, fine. Let me keep my eyes peeled for you. So I came up with a property. It was about 45,000 feet in San Bernardino, across from the courthouse there. It was a nice property, but it was only like 65% occupied. And some attorneys owned it, and they really didn't care about the building. They were just too busy practicing law. And, but it had potential. So I told him about it. He says, well, let's go take a look. So we drove out there, and he looked at it, and he goes, I like the building, but I can't pay him this, what they're asking. I could go to whatever it was, 2.1 million or 2.2 million. And so we made an offer, and they countered back, and he said, I'll tell you what, I'd buy the building at that, but I need them to sign a new 5-year lease. and staying upon it. And so they ended up agreeing to that. We got the deal done. And he and his partner ended up fixing the building up and getting it leased. And I went off and I was doing my thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he contacts me like 7 months later and said, hey, I made $750,000 on that building. And I want to get some more of these. And I want to do this full time. And I said, well, that's great. And he goes, but I want you to come over and, help me buy buildings. And I go, you know what? You just don't buy enough property, but
right.
I'm happy to help you in any way I can. And so he went off and did his thing. And periodically he would call and ask me if I had anything. I said, not right now, but when I do, I'll send it your way. And then, which I did, but some of the stuff he just didn't connect with. And then this went on for probably a year and a half, 2 years. And then he called me up on a Sunday night and said, hey, I want to talk to you about coming to work with me. And I said, well, you know what? Like I said, you just don't buy enough property. And he goes, no, I have 500,000 square feet right now. I said, you do? You didn't buy it around here, though. And he goes, no. I bought it in Texas and Alabama. And he says, listen, you really need to come over and talk to me about this. And he goes, why don't you come by my office? I said, okay, fine, which I did. And I went to his office and he showed me this diagram of what he wanted to do. And it was, he said, I bought 500,000 square feet. I want to buy another 500,000 square feet next year. And then I want to buy another 1 million square feet. And then after that, 2 million. Then I want to be a REIT. I was like, whoa. I go, he says, listen, I really want to do this. I'm going to do this. So you can either come over and work with me and invest with me and help me get this done, or you can just keep doing your thing. And I was like, geez. I said, okay, look, let me talk to my wife about it and see how she feels, right? So I went home, and that night I talked to her about it. She goes, well, do you really think he's going to be able to buy that much property? I said, he seems pretty intent on making it happen, and he's acquired 500,000 square feet, so it tells me that he's pretty serious about it. So she said, well, if you think he's going to do it. And I said, what's the worst going to happen? I'll just jump back into brokerage. And so I did. And the first couple of buildings that we bought were very large, 200,000 feet, 300,000 feet, from a Canadian investor in Dallas. And I thought, I've been doing commercial brokerage for 18 years, walk in the park, no big deal. And then we put the buildings in escrow, and I found out quite quickly it's very different from brokerage. And this the vice president of the company I was dealing with quickly surmised I was a neophyte at being a purchaser of big office buildings. So he took me to school. He was playing me, and he was very good at it. And I was totally stressed out of my mind. I mean, I had all these legal pads in front of me, writing questions. This was the questions I asked to this person, this one, and it just kept getting more and more intense as the due diligence clock was ticking. And as we got towards the end, I could barely keep up with it. And I'm getting besieged with questions from everybody: the real estate attorney, the CPA, the investor, it was just driving me bananas. I couldn't wait to get it over with. Mm-hmm. So we finally got it done. In about 2 or 3 weeks after we did that, I was coming out of the office one morning, and one of the gals that worked there said, hey, he wants to talk to you when you have a chance. He's in his office. I said, okay. So I went in there, and he said, have a seat. So I sit down, and he closes the door, and after a long pause, he asked me, how did you miss all those things on those transactions we just did? And I was like, what do you mean specifically? And then he started going down the list, and I was like, I don't know. I wasn't even aware of that. I didn't know I should have asked that question. And then he said, which really kind of hit me hard, was I think I made a huge mistake hiring you as my senior vice president of acquisitions. And at that point, it was like, maybe he's right. Maybe he did make a huge mistake. And so that night when I went home, I tossed and turned, couldn't get much sleep, and was thinking about, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? And then I decided when I got up that morning, I said, you know what? I'm going to create a reference manual for myself with all the questions to ask and the issues to review, and create some checklists so I don't make this mistake again. Because I can't do this if I'm reinventing the wheel every time we buy an investment. And that's exactly what I started to do. And it was amazing how fast the reference manual I was drafting was becoming quickly filled up with a lot of issues and things. Because I was running a lot of lessons. And we kept growing as a firm and doing larger transactions. And at one point, we were buying all office buildings at the time. We did buy one hotel, a large hotel, 377 rooms, which is a whole other story in itself.
Yeah, I bet it is. Because to go from office buildings to hotels is a little, truly, I mean, obvious point is it's another, right, it's another industry. I mean, that's just the simple way of putting it. It's like it's another,
You're buying a business with a real estate component is what I tell people.
Yeah.
But at any rate, we bought a 1.8 million square foot portfolio from Sam Zell of Equity Office Properties. And then we bought a 2.2 million square foot portfolio from Transwestern, which had 4 buildings in Dallas and 3 buildings in Dallas, 4 in Chicago. And when we were buying those, we had the same 30-day due diligence, 30-day close. And so it was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
The scope of, because we just were a little group of people that were doing this, right? So we really had to be on our A game and have a process and a system in place so we knew exactly what we were doing next, where we were at all times, and collecting all the data, because there was just so much info to go through in such a short period of time. And plus we were on site there for a while. And so it was a very challenging thing, but once we got it done, it really just gave me the confidence in the process and systems that I had put together, and noting to myself that, hey, you know what? It's just a matter of, once you have the system, it could be 1 billion square feet, really, as long as you got the people and the process and systems and everybody on it, and the checklists, right, to know that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing and follow up. But very, very important, because the other thing I learned by dealing with institutional sellers is, you think that no shenanigans go on, everybody's on the up and up. And it's not that I'm saying that they're necessarily out to get you,
no,
but they've been through it so many times that they're masters at putting you off or having an excuse or whatever the case may be, that if you aren't aware of what's going on, it's not if you're going to get burned, it's when you're going to get burned. And so it's really, really important that people understand that it's not the sexiest part, the due diligence of purchasing investment real estate, but it's certainly, in my mind, the crux of it, because it could either make or break your investment.
Yeah, due diligence is huge. I mean, that's what I love your title, right? Due Diligence Handbook for Commercial Real Estate. It's like, it's very straightforward. This is what it talks about. This is why you need it. And this is what it does. And due diligence, to me, makes or breaks the deal. And I feel like, I'm one of those few people I know who actually enjoys due diligence. Like, I enjoy looking through all the paperwork. I enjoy reading the contracts. I enjoy looking at the financials. So I'm one of those few people who kind of like, oh yeah, let me do the due diligence. This is going to be fun, because I feel like I understand what I'm purchasing, right? I mean, as an investor and as a consultant, right? I understand what my clients want to purchase, and I understand what I'm purchasing inside of my own portfolio. So to me, to not do due diligence ends up being something that you're pretty much going to pay for. Right? You're going to miss something because every property has a something in it, even if it's just a single family that you're buying in Alabama. Everything's got a something to it. And so, yeah, I mean, due diligence is absolutely required and necessary.
I bought a brand new building one time. Not brand new. It was about a year old.
Okay, pretty new.
Brand new.
Yeah, it's pretty new.
And it was a pretty good sized building. It was like 125,000 feet, something like that, office building.
Right.
And it had some issues. I mean, there was a ton of issues, but there were some issues. And it's just, you can't assume because it's new or institutionally owned or whatever that there's no issues. No, that's a bad mistake. I always tell people, if you get nothing else out of reading the book, the Due Diligence Handbook for Commercial Real Estate, it's just get this: assume nothing. Assume nothing. Mm-hmm. Okay, because as soon as you do, that's when you get in trouble.
That's where
people get in trouble. Seasoned investors, say, man, I just assumed that no.
I just assumed they'd keep good books. I just assumed that just because I bought 3 properties, they'd have 3 different sets of books for 3 different properties. I just assumed they would identify,
Yeah, they would never do anything like that.
They would never commingle funds. They would never, I just assume, and they do. And it's not necessarily like you said, they're trying to rip you off. It really has to do with, their practices and their, how their level of detail orientation or their bookkeeper's level of detail orientation, or how often they check their I like math, right? So how often do they check their books? We just assume, of course the property's not going to be built on somebody else's property line. It's not going to be built across the property line. That would never happen. Of course, I'm going to get the minimal rights with the land I'm purchasing. Would that be an of course, right? I was like, no.
Sounds like you purchased some property in Texas before.
How'd you know about Texas? That's correct. You're right.
Anyway.
You nailed it.
There's also the human error thing that, it's like, for instance, we were buying that 1.8 million square foot portfolio. And one of the stories I tell is we had to walk all the suites, and the property managers said, no, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to have enough time. I said, well, you're right. We're tight on time. So let's get started now. So we were walking the suites, and we were on like the 7th floor and walking around, and I got the rent roll in my hand, and I said, where's suite 708? And we walked around and it's like, it's not here. Where is it? Let me get back to you on that one. So put a little highlight next to it. Right. So later that day, when she called me, she says, okay, now I see what happened. There was a vacant suite there, and the people on both sides grew into it, and we just never took that off the rent roll. I was like, whoa, okay, thanks for, it wasn't they were trying to hide it.
No, yeah, they just didn't, it was clerical error, right?
Yeah, Oversight. It was an oversight.
It was oversight.
Could be a number. I mean, I've been through so many of them that there's story after story, but you just, you really, really need to make it so that's your focus. When you start your due diligence, you got your checklist, you got your questions, you got your system, you got everything. And the beauty of that is it really allows you to take a lot of the stress out of the process, because let's face it, there's a lot of plates up in the air when you're buying a property, right? You got your physical, mechanical, financial, document stuff, the loan process, appraisal, you're dealing with market stuff, trying to pull up information. I mean, it's just
demographics, target market, who's your renter. For some, it's even traffic flow and whether or not there's enough parking.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff. So it's just, if you don't have a system, you're kind of leaving it to memory, which is kind of crazy, because I tell them it's like a pilot. They could have flown 50,000 hours. They still take out their pre-flight checklist to go through everything because they don't want to forget something, right? And it's the same with the due diligence. You wouldn't I don't ever get into a transaction without having my checklist and knowing exactly what my next steps are. And I review it every single time. I use the book as that. I mean, I listen to when I'm doing an acquisition, I listen to even though it drives me crazy to have to hear some of my stuff again, but it reminds me, oh gosh, yeah, that's right. I got to do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, not to belabor the point, but if you get that, and the fact, like you said, you actually enjoy it, I would say learn to enjoy it. Become a detective at it, because the more you do, the better you get at it. Yeah. And the first time you've come up with something, first of all, I tell people, it's not just about finding problems. I found tons of value enhancers, right? Like, whoa, there's a clause in this lease that says that they have to pay for after hours electrical usage, and they haven't been billed on this stuff, right? And they have a crew of people in there till 10 o'clock at night. I'm going to put a sub-meter on their space, right? That's just an example, but it's all sorts of stuff like that, just haven't been, there's just a bunch of stuff. You and I could talk for another hour. Some of the value enhancers that can be out there, but it's just, it's exciting when you find it, because it's like, oh my gosh, what a savings this would be, or do you know what this is going to add to the value of the property?
Yeah, or the lot next door, and how big is the lot next door? And sometimes the lot next door that they're selling with the property is bigger than they think it is, right? When you go there and you go, hey, you know what? I actually could build a whole nother unit on there. I could build an ADU on there, whether that's residential, right, or whether it's commercial, like you said. One might be you find a unit that doesn't exist. Okay, the rent roll's a little lower than we thought, and the other might be no. There are clauses in these leases that can absolutely help me, because every dollar of increased income, right? If you're dealing with a cap rate, you're dealing with commercial property, ends up with being a noticeable increase in the value of the property.
If you start learning how to shave expenses, value engineer it, and you start seeing where you can enhance value. That's what my How to Add Value handbook for commercial real estate goes into detail about what leases are, how they are. It's a reminder for people that are in the industry, but it's also a great foundation builder for people that are just getting started with it, and they're like, wow, that really can add a lot of value to a property just by looking at it that way, or structuring your lease that way, or the way you set it up. So that's where it gets real exciting.
So I'm going to switch the subject over a little bit, just because I am sad to say we only have 10 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
I know, it's like, seriously, we could do this for 2 hours. So I always like to talk about how everybody that I know who's been in real estate for a while has a hard moment. There was a moment where you really had to face something, face yourself, face real estate, and make a decision on how to solve it. So what was your hardest moment in investing, and how did you solve it? And whether that's on your professional side or your personal side, because you're also personally an investor as well.
Yeah, but the toughest lesson, I didn't get to solve it really.
Okay, well, tell us about
it. There is a lesson in it for everybody. I think,
how did it help you grow up then? If you didn't get to solve it, at least how did it help you grow up and be a better investor?
Okay. What happened was, after I had left the investor I was working for, I decided to go into syndication. And my first deal that I did was 350,000 square feet of office space, 5 office buildings in Houston. And the market there was just turning and coming out of a long downturn. It had gone through the petroleum industry going down. Enron was a major stigma. It was just, they had been beaten up bad. And all of a sudden, things were turning around with the energy business, because there was a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and they were taking huge chunks of office space down. And since I had been going there looking at properties, I was hearing this story and then talking to the brokers, and they're saying, yeah, we're supposed to do something like, we might even do 3 million square feet of positive absorption this year. And I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Well, they ended up doing like 5.5 million, right? So I was like, whoa, this is really getting strong here. I'm going to start paying more attention down here and seeing if I can come up with something. And this broker that I saw sent me the offering memorandum for this portfolio of properties. And when I saw it and I went through it, it was like all the ding, 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 all the bells and whistles were going off that it had been owned by a very high net worth family out of New York for 12 years. They never really put any money into it. They bought it super cheap. The rents were anywhere from 18 to 25% below market. And we're in good areas. And I was like, man, if there was ever a value add project, this is one. It's got everything mismanaged. They never wanted to do any deals. If they had to do a deal, they had to put money in, they'd rather pass on it, right? So I said, I'm going to see what I can do with this. So I ended up putting it under contract. We ended up getting the deal done. And while we were in escrow, I was able to get a 26,000 square foot lease with a tenant done before we closed, subject to our closing. And so the lender was thrilled, the investors were thrilled, and we were off to the races. And we just started right away putting our plan in action, fixing the buildings up, leasing it up, renewing the leases at higher rents, which is never an easy thing to do because you got tenants that have been in there for a long time. They knew they were on a gravy train there forever.
And they don't want to give that up.
Yeah, but we managed to add a lot of value to it in a fairly short period of time, and then the market started to change. The subprime lending market was starting to rear its ugly head, and I said, we got to get out of these properties, and we got to get out of them quick. So I put them on the market with the broker. And we found a buyer, and he couldn't get a loan. Yeah. And he tried, and he tried, and he tried. And I was getting on the phone with him, with all these lenders, and the lenders were going, no, we're just not lending on it.
We're not touching on that. We're not touching that asset class. We're not touching investment grade. We're not doing it.
So I was like, okay, I got to cut this guy loose. So I said, I'm really sorry, but I got to move on. I'm sorry it didn't work out for you. So we put him back on the market. This was summer of 2008. And I ended up getting an all cash offer on the two biggest buildings, which was about 170,000 feet. And I thought, okay, if I can pull this off, I'll get it, even with this crummy market we're in, I'll get out of this loan, put another loan on it because I'll have plenty of cash to put down on them. And we'll be okay. We could ride this out. Right. Well, right about the time we got into escrow, they were going through their due diligence, is when Hank Paulson decided to do his financial Armageddon speech. And that freaked them out. They were like, we're not going to move forward with this. We're going to wait until your things settle down here in the U.S., right? It was a Swedish pension fund that was going to buy it.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. So at any rate, so it's like, okay, I'm in this for the long haul. So about 3 weeks after that, I got hit by Hurricane Ike, which I was like, I didn't even want to turn on CNN. I was like, no, I can't watch this. And they had used it pretty hard. But the next morning I get a call from the property manager, and he says, I think we're going to be okay. There was some glass breakage, some flooding, and the roofs got a little bit torn up on a couple of the buildings, but I already got guys down there and they're working on getting it fixed. I was like, okay. And so we managed to put all that together, got it moving down the right path again. And then not too long after that, I get a call from somebody from GE Capital that says, we bought your loan and I'm the new asset manager and you're going to be dealing with us. And da, 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 da. I was like, oh my gosh, if like, these are like the last people I really want to deal with, because I was involved with the deal where I was an investor and they really gave us a hard time. We managed to get out of it, but and sell the property, make some money, but it was like very, very onerous project. So, and they had been down there buying a bunch of properties. So what happened was I knew my properties were cash flowing. Even in the terrible time we were in there, they were cash flowing. Now,
That's good.
This was in 2009 and 2010, and then the loan was coming due for renewal. And it was a CMBS loan, and it had certain criteria, yield hurdles that it had to meet, which there's no way that it would have, even at the best of times, but I never anticipated we were going to be holding it that long. The idea was to add the value, get out, move on. So I said to him, listen, I can tell you right now, we're not going to be able to meet the debt service coverage ratio on these, but you know, I'm obviously doing something right if I'm cash flowing here. So
and I'm paying you on a regular basis. Right.
Right. So why don't we just work something out where I stay in for another year, I'll manage it. We'll have some kind of waterfall in there for you get your money back and then some, and then we hopefully get all our money back and then some. And it'll all work out once we weather the storm here. And they said, no, we'll take it back. You give us $1 million right now, we'll extend it out for a year. And I said, well, number one, I don't have $1 million. Right. Number two, even if I did, I don't think I'd give it to you. So, and they said, well, then we'll take the property back. So I was like, oh my gosh, here I got $4.5 million of mine and everybody else's money that because it was a no-brainer. I mean, we would have doubled our money with the first guy. That was if he would have got his loan. And then the second group obviously wasn't.
Just ran away. Yep.
Yeah. So they were quite intent on wanting to take these properties from me. So what happened was, as in Texas is a very lender-friendly state, so they give you a notice of default, and then the first Tuesday of the next month, they get to sell it on the courthouse steps. So
That's quick.
That's pretty quick.
That's quick.
So I think it has to be 21 days. They're very generous of them to get you.
Oh, good. 21 days to find $1 million or to solve this problem.
No, find 20, whatever it was, 23 million. So what happened was I asked my attorneys, I go, what do I do? I go, these guys they're obviously playing hardball with me. And they said, well, you could sue them. And I go, well, what are my chances? And they said, you probably got a 50-50 chance depending upon the judge. And I said, well, then let's do it. And we should have. And we won. We won the stay because the judge said, hey, if these guys didn't know what they're doing, why are they cash flowing? You should try to work something out with them, right?
Right. You should be acting in good faith.
Yeah. So it's kind of freaked GE Capital. They were like, what?
What? Yeah. So what do you mean you're standing up to us? Come on, we're the big guys, right?
Exactly. They're going to mow us over like a
right. We're going to be able to outlaw you any day.
Yeah. So, but I had a few pit bull attorneys that were real estate attorneys that were investors in it, and they wanted me to claim bankruptcy, which if you do that, in a single purpose entity, then you're actually just personal recourse, right?
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. There's nothing in the operating agreement that compels me to have to do that. But then after I thought about it, I thought, you know what? If it helps the investors out, I'll do it. Right?
Okay.
So I asked my attorney, I go, what do I do? And he goes, here's a bankruptcy attorney. Why don't you just call him up, talk to him, see what he says. So he said, okay, Brian, you heard my story. And he goes, let me ask you a question. He goes, what if they say yes and say, okay, fine, it's only worth X. Give us our money and we'll go away. And he says, you prepared to be able to go out and get a new loan? I go, no. I said, that would probably cost me $6-7 million, and I don't have that right now. And he goes, well, then give him back the keys. I was like, whoa, really? And he goes, yeah, that's really it. And I said, okay. So I hung up the phone. I was like, man, I gotta keep trying on this one. So I flew to Chicago and I met with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, listen, we own property all over the country. We'll take this back. And I said, you don't understand. I said, you take it back, nobody's going to want to lease any of the spaces. Then after a year and a half, 2 years of doing that, you're going to say, hey, we better sell these things.
Right.
Then you're going to sell it. And because
At a
it's
greater
a
loss
property, they're going to say it's going to spell big discount to anybody who's going to buy it. So why not just keep going down the path with me and make money on it, and we'll all win.
And I'll keep paying you and you'll be happy.
Goes, no, we're not going to do that.
Oh my.
So they ended up foreclosing on it. And unfortunately, I was right. About a year and a half later,
oh no.
he ended up putting them on the market, and they ended up taking about a $5.5 million, $6 million loss on the thing. And it was tough. It was probably the hardest thing I ever had to do in my commercial investing career. And so there's some takeaways from this.
Yeah. So tell us your lessons. What did you learn?
Okay. Here's some lessons for you. I don't know if everybody's going to agree with my lessons that I learned, but one is definitely don't over leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And try to get long-term debt put on there so you don't get in that position.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful about who your investors are if you're syndicating it. And I won't go any further than that because you can kind of read between the lines on it. The other thing is I had family and friends in there, which I was so intent on making them money because it was a no-brainer. It really was. We added so much value to the thing. We just thought it's going to add the value, flip, and get out. Well, it didn't work out that way. Yeah. And so that was very difficult to go back to them and to tell them, hey, I'm really sorry. I did the best I could and got caught in a bad spot. And your money's gone. And that was, even though some of my investors were very sophisticated and they said, hey, we went in eyes wide open and whatever. Right. There were some that were there that weren't so sophisticated. Yeah. And that was a really tough pill to swallow.
They probably accused you personally. I've heard it. I mean, you know, if you've lost their money and they've trusted you as a friend, they accuse you personally.
Well, I was just going to say, there's the human factor that's in there. And what's the human factor? The human factor is people need somebody to blame. Yeah. Right? People need somebody to blame. It had nothing to do with, you know, the Great Recession and all the wheels coming off the bus when it went off the cliff with everybody. It had nothing to do with it. And it just had to be like, hey, you are got to be the whipping post on this one, you know? Right. So I just tell people, before you get so hell-bent to get your friends, family, and, you know, everybody else that you want to put into it, just think hard about it, because it's a big decision. And and then there's the myriad of other lessons that I've learned about, you know, what happens. I'll tell you, people say, what's the greatest lesson you learned out of that whole thing? And I said, you know what the greatest lesson was? Is you can, if you have strong faith, you can get through anything that is put in front of you. And I did. I made it through it. And I didn't have to go BK. I didn't lose my home. Came close to getting divorced a couple of times.
Yeah, I understand that one.
Yeah. I'm still married to the same woman. So that worked out. But that was the biggest lesson. And just do the right thing. Always do the right thing.
Always do the right thing.
You know, I know we're at the end of our little visitation here, but I will give you my other, what are the greatest things you need to know about when you're investing? And it's all about love and service. That's really what it's about. If you have that as your pole star, as your guiding posts, then you're always going to be doing the right thing and always going to be in a position where you got God on your side, really, just steering you. And that doesn't mean it's all going to be smooth all the time.
No,
it is,
clearly.
Because we're learning a bunch of lessons here too. But I will tell you that people pick up on your motives and, your intent and your sincerity.
Mm-hmm.
And if they see that you're a good person and you really want to do the right thing, because I always tell people it's only a good deal if it's a good deal for everybody.
That's right.
Really.
Right.
So a lot of people get thrown off by that. Like, what do you mean? That's just like,
it's only a good deal if it's a good deal for everybody.
You can learn it now, or you can learn it the hard way.
That's right.
And sometimes people don't learn it at all.
Oh, they don't.
But it's very true. So I will part with that last piece of advice for you and your listeners.
That's ideal.
And I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Brian, I want to appreciate you. I really do. I appreciate this. I know a lot of people do podcasts, and you've probably been on multiple podcasts given, your books and your history and your depth of knowledge. But I really appreciate it because on this one, I really try to strive for, well, what is it that gives us the resilience and the inner metal, the inner constitution to face that real estate can be tough. And I appreciate you being transparent about that and reaching for that level of authenticity. What is it that really guides people through? A good character, being straight, being authentic, being honest, making sure everybody's got a win. And for many of us, some spiritual path of some kind being your guiding light. And so I really appreciate you being transparent and going there with us. And don't be surprised if I invite you back again, because I still have questions I haven't finished. So
I'd love to come back.
Okay, good. Because it might be Brian Hennessey part 2. So thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it immensely. So
I did too.
That open invitation there. So
thank you so much for listening to the Real Estate Breakthrough Show with Christina Suter and today Brian Hennessey. And I look forward to talking to you guys again next week.